A sweeping view reveals a massive walled city nestled between mountains and the sea, surrounded by vast agricultural fields. Inside a busy guild hall, a small girl with braided hair sits at a towering counter among cloaked figures. Blinking in sheer confusion, the young girl lets out a bewildered gasp. Leaning over the counter, the girl asks the hesitant receptionist to repeat her shocking statement. Stunned by the rejection, she processes the crushing news that she is forbidden from building a new home. The intricate details of her worn traveling cloak highlight her long journey to reach this place. Standing proudly beside her towering loyal horse, the young traveler maintains a hopeful demeanor. Her frustrated scream echoes outside the building's entrance as she demands a reason for the refusal. The receptionist, Chris, confirms that non-citizens of Peru cannot build homes, despite the girl's belief that anyone could live freely in the Labyrinth City of Garel. Although Garel accepts anyone, Chris clarifies that foreigners are strictly prohibited from constructing their own houses. Sweating with anxiety, the young traveler desperately asks what it takes to become an official citizen of the country. Her hopes are instantly shattered when she is bluntly told that gaining citizenship is an impossible feat. The girl reels in dismay as she learns that immigrants are only recognized after 3 generations and a rigorous examination, making her current traveler status a major obstacle. Trying to find a loophole, she eagerly asks about finding work, only to learn that securing a job without a formal introduction is incredibly difficult. Chris reiterates the harsh reality that foreigners struggle to find official employment, though registered adventurers might bypass these restrictions. The receptionist narrows her eyes, scrutinizing the tiny girl with visible skepticism. Offended by Chris assuming she is joking, the girl indignantly defends her status as a genuine traveling adventurer. Hopping down from her stool, she proudly declares her 2 years of frontier experience and decides to simply earn travel money here instead. Staring up with a resigned expression, she formally abandons her dream of settling down in the city. Pouting fiercely, she vows to switch counters and return strictly as a working adventurer rather than a hopeful immigrant. Emitting frustrated noises, the small girl abruptly turns her back and stomps away from the housing desk. As she leaves, history reveals that the Labyrinth City of Garel was originally just a fertile coastal region. The landscape dramatically transformed into a bustling metropolis following the sudden birth of the underground Pyarini Labyrinth. Fumbling nervously at the new counter, the girl attempts to present her official guild card. She firmly places her worn adventurer identification into the waiting hands of the guild staff. Reflecting on her long journey to find the perfect home, she suddenly remembers that her companion Peruchan is still waiting outside. Meanwhile, her loyal brown steed waits patiently inside a quiet stable alongside a white horse. Rushing outside, she cheerfully apologizes to her beloved horse for the lengthy delay. Grabbing the reins, she excitedly declares that they are finally ready to officially enter the city. Noting the setting sun, she worries that finding an available inn for the night will be nearly impossible. Assessing their limited options near the Great Archway, she suggests they bed down in the stables located by the outer wall. Leading her faithful companion through the fading light, the young adventurer approaches the modest stable to rest for the night. The young girl with braided hair looks up in shock, exclaiming her disbelief at being unable to do something. 2 men, one older and one younger, approach the girl and explain that staying in the city can be dangerous and is not allowed for safety reasons. The older man points out her countryside origins, but the girl innocently questions if the countryside isn't actually much scarier. Ignoring her logic, the man recounts terrifying encounters with giant wolves and unpredictable monsters, arguing that staying near the stables is safest for a quick escape. Sweating nervously, the older man awkwardly adds that the city also harbors bad adults who prey on little girls like her. Crossing his arms with a troubled expression, he admits that he cannot simply book a room for her right now. Resigning himself to the situation, he points toward a wooden gate and tells her to use the area close to the manager's room. The 2 men kindly promise to keep an eye on her until morning and offer to bring her some fresh straw. A huge, beaming smile stretches across the young girl's face as she happily thanks them for their help. While the younger man offers to give her directions to the orphanage, the older man mutters in disbelief about a little girl traveling alone and sleeping in a stable. Settling into the wooden stall, the girl begins preparing her temporary space right next to her loyal brown horse. Standing proudly beside her steed, she hums a cheerful tune and announces that their bed for the night is ready. Smiling with quiet satisfaction, she holds a wrapped bun and prepares to eat her simple dinner. Watching her horse happily munch from a bucket, she apologizes and promises to buy some fresh vegetables the next day. While acknowledging the threat of bad adults, her expression hardens as she reminds herself that the real terror lies with the monsters. The scene shifts to a massive, monstrous boar lurking dangerously close to the outer walls, proving that even large cities are not entirely safe. A glowing magical barrier is explained as the essential defense magic used to completely protect an area from invading monsters. Clutching her cloak, the girl notes that people who lack innate magic skills must rely on magical paper instead. A detailed glimpse of the disposable magical paper reveals its intricate runes, which allow the user to cast spells with minimal magical power. Glancing at the expensive paper in her hand, she admits that she always uses it in secret since it is highly unusual for a child to possess such an item. Focusing intensely on the paper, she begins the process of infusing it with her magical power. Standing in front of her resting horse and neatly piled luggage, she holds the small slip of paper as it begins to glow with energy. A soft sizzling sound echoes as the magical paper activates between her fingers. She squeezes her eyes shut in mild frustration as the item instantly vanishes, just as it always does. A close-up shows her holding a thick stack of several more valuable magical papers. Clutching the remaining papers to her chest, she admits feeling a lingering sense of unease about her situation. Slumping tiredly against her horse, she sighs and reflects that she rushed to this labyrinth city purely because it was close, a careless decision she now regrets. Her wide, solemn eyes stare into the distance as she contemplates her uncertain future. Staring at the wooden ceiling, she mourns her quickly fading plan to rent a room, stabilize her life, and eventually build her own house. The narrative reveals that her deep desire to own a home actually stems from a dream she held in her past life. A sudden, violent flashback shows her past self as a modern office worker being instantly killed by a mysterious line passing through her body. Following that abrupt death, she somehow found herself reincarnated in this strange fantasy world that is neither Japan nor Earth. The young girl remembers regaining her past life memories at age 10 while running through a dark, splattered void. Pushing through the harsh elements, she reflects on finally reaching her destination after a grueling journey. Staring blankly upward, she whispers that even after all her effort, things didn't go as planned. Sighing with a heavy heart, she cynically accepts that life always throws unexpected obstacles in her way. Startled from her gloomy thoughts, she blinks in confusion as her loyal horse gently nudges her cheek. Smiling warmly at her equine companion, she asks if he is trying to comfort her and assures him she is not feeling down. Petting the horse's snout, she resolves to keep working as an adventurer to earn enough money to move to another town. She happily recalls how Peru-chan, with his tough body but gentle heart, became her fiercely protective companion a year ago. Amused by the horse's insistent nudging, she chuckles and asks if he is already demanding she go to sleep. Looking fondly at Peru-chan, she plans to do side jobs tomorrow and casually mentions selling items from her pouch if her remaining funds fall short. A bright, determined smile lights up her face as she firmly declares she will never give up. Gaping out at the world, she makes a silent, unwavering vow to one day build her very own house. The peaceful morning sky dawns over the towering trees surrounding the quiet stable. Stretching her arms wide with a refreshed yawn, she happily notes how long it has been since she slept so peacefully. The older stable hand approaches to check on the little miss, and she cheerfully assures him there were no problems. She asks about making breakfast outside, but the man warns her that using fire near the stables will scare the horses. He advises her to spend a single copper coin at the nearby morning market by the outer wall instead of cooking. Noting it is her first time in Garel, he abruptly warns her to stay away from the north gate, prompting her curious question. Staring blankly, she listens as he bluntly explains the presence of a dangerous slum in that district. He details how an old, barren military training ground slowly transformed into a sprawling shantytown with terrible security. Politely thanking him for the warning, she marvels internally that even such a massive, prosperous city harbors a slum. Turning back to her towering steed, she decides she must tidy up her appearance before heading out into the city. Brushing off her travel-worn cloak, she worries that the city guards will deny her entry if she remains covered in dirt. She methodically begins gathering her scattered belongings from the stable floor. Standing confidently beside her neatly packed luggage, she declares herself completely ready to face the day. With a sharp, practiced motion, she swiftly draws out another piece of magical paper. Holding the glowing slip close to her chest, she firmly invokes a cleansing spell. Despite the luxury of the spell, she cheerfully notes that expanding the magical range will perfectly wash both herself and her gear. Sitting on the ground, she meticulously tightens the straps on her sturdy leather boots. Pinning her braided hair back, she assumes an expression of pure, unyielding focus. Stepping back to admire her sparkling clean clothes and neatly packed gear, she happily praises her refreshed appearance. As Peru-chan gives a spirited neigh, she boldly announces her plan to hit the morning market before submitting her relocation notice to the Adventurers Guild. Stepping into the bustling morning market, the young adventurer gasps in pure wonder. A sprawling avenue of vendor stalls stretches out before her, packed with eager shoppers and fresh goods. Weaving through the crowded thoroughfare, she happily takes in the vibrant sights and sounds of the commercial district. Staring at a display of bread, she sighs heavily at the inflated city prices and notes that a half-size sandwich is far too small for a growing girl. Her eyes immediately light up with excitement when she spots a massive bargain, realizing she can get 5 entire vegetable skewers for a single copper coin. Reaching eagerly across the wooden counter, she hands her money to a smiling merchant to secure her breakfast. Sparkles of pure joy radiate from her as she triumphantly hoists her freshly cooked meal into the air. Approaching another stall, she carefully examines a massive, unfamiliar root vegetable while 2 burly merchants look on with amusement. Recognizing her awe over the strange produce, the friendly merchant chuckles and correctly guesses that it is her first time visiting Garel. Beaming with enthusiasm, she proudly confirms her newcomer status and eagerly accepts the man's offer to teach her about the metropolis. Quickly drawing a crowd, she listens intently as the generous locals gather around to explain the layout of their massive home. She learns that Garel is divided into 5 distinct districts, with the safest, most expensive prime real estate located in the central and southern areas, far away from the dangerous Pyarini Labyrinth. The merchants explain that the northern sector boasts a gritty downtown atmosphere filled with bustling inns and shops heavily catering to rowdy adventurers. Conversely, the shadow of the massive outer wall hides a notoriously dangerous slum district that honest folks actively avoid. They further describe a bustling eastern commercial zone filled with private homes, along with a lively port town on the city's edge dedicated to seafood processing. Finally, she discovers that her current location on the western side serves as the main entrance for travelers, complete with sprawling agricultural fields and humble farmers. Blinking in sudden realization, she turns her attention back to the bustling street traffic passing behind her. Pausing mid-step, she curiously observes a large horse-drawn wagon ferrying several passengers down the cobblestone road. The locals explain that ordinary citizens rely on these shared carriages, since bringing a personal horse into the city requires special permission and exorbitant registration fees. Frowning slightly, she stubbornly vows never to let go of Peru-chan, fully accepting that keeping her loyal companion makes becoming a permanent resident impossible. Shrugging off the disappointment, she cheerfully decides to bypass the riding ban by simply walking Peru-chan by the reins and taking him outside the city for regular exercise. Spotting a familiar symbol down the street, she pauses and wonders aloud if she has finally reached her destination. Staring up at the grand, imposing double doors, she takes a deep breath and prepares to enter the official Adventurers Guild headquarters. Staring up with wide-eyed wonder, the young adventurer marvels at the grand architecture of the stone building before her. Inside the bustling hall, numerous armed adventurers gather around the polished reception desks and towering notice boards. Glancing around the lively room, she spots 2 rugged men chatting casually at a nearby wooden table. Taking in the sheer scale of the facility, she internally praises the impressive headquarters of the Adventurers Guild. Marching up to the counter with renewed determination, she announces her intent to submit a formal relocation notice. Blinking in sheer confusion, the elegant receptionist stares down at the tiny traveler. Quickly recovering her professional composure, the receptionist politely agrees to process the paperwork. Reviewing the documents, the clerk confirms the young girl's name as Chris Nina. Nina nods affirmatively and explains that her last official job was located back in the town of Sursud. Touching a glowing, fruit-like crystal on her desk, the receptionist smoothly verifies the girl's travel history. This magical verification is made possible by spirit trees, which create a massive, interconnected network for storing and retrieving guild data. Nina silently marvels at the advanced system, comparing the true crystal's function to a modern contactless payment machine. Because only individuals with a highly prized, rare skill can maintain these trees, the system remains an incredibly valuable luxury. The receptionist smiles warmly, noting that Nina's flawless completion record will soon promote her from copper to silver rank. Curious about her ultimate goals, the clerk asks if Nina came to challenge the infamous Pyarini Labyrinth. She warns that while copper ranks can enter, lower-ranked adventurers must join established, high-ranking parties to survive the dangerous underground maze. Hearing that Nina prefers general city jobs, the clerk advises her to visit the Western District branch instead of this specialized headquarters. Realizing she won't return here often, the young adventurer eagerly asks if the building houses any free archives or books. The receptionist quickly shatters those hopes by stating that basic information costs a minimum of 3 silver coins. While an archive exists on the second floor, strict rules completely forbid removing any of the expensive materials. Drooping slightly at the harsh reality of city prices, Nina respectfully accepts the strict guild rules. Taking pity on the girl, the clerk suggests she buy drinks for the veteran adventurers at the nearby cafe to cheaply gather local intel. Offering a gentle smile, the helpful receptionist formally introduces herself as Anna. Grateful for the tip, Nina thanks Anna, who promises to answer simple questions for free during their future chats. Anna sternly warns the young girl to only interrogate people inside the safety of the heavily guarded guild hall. Narrowing her eyes suspiciously, the receptionist questions if the tiny girl standing before her is genuinely 13 years old. Ignoring the heavy doubt, Anna maternally orders Nina to eat a proper meal, prompting a cheerful agreement from the traveler. Adjusting her heavy backpack, the young adventurer confidently marches toward the seated men in the cafe area. The two rugged adventurers pause their private conversation as the small girl approaches their table. Throwing her arm out dramatically, she loudly orders an ale for the bewildered gentleman. 3 massive, frothing wooden tankards of ale are swiftly prepared for the unexpected negotiation. Happily accepting the liquid bribe, the men explain that headquarters requests mostly consist of hunting monsters or gathering plants deep inside the labyrinth. Nina listens as the veteran adventurers explain that high-ranked jobs like hunting rare monsters or escorting valuables to the royal capital are extremely difficult. They clarify the first-come, first-served rule of the guild request board, explaining why they are scouting for good jobs even on their day off. The men emphasize the competitive nature of monster hunting, warning that party members must be gathered immediately once a rare request appears. When Nina mentions her plan to hunt in the forest outside the city walls, the adventurers pause to consider her choice. One adventurer asks if the young girl will be safe hunting alone, noting that while the forest is less dangerous than the labyrinth, it still poses risks. Nina confidently declares she will be fine because her reliable draft horse, Peruchan, is accompanying her. She explains that Peruchan possesses a special skill that allows him to sense monster presence without getting startled, making him the perfect partner for outside work. The adventurer, Kane, realizes that the forest Nina plans to visit falls under the jurisdiction of the Western District branch office. Determined to help the young girl, Kane takes out a small scrap of paper and begins writing a quick note. He hands the paper to Nina, explaining that he has a reliable friend stationed at the Western District branch. Kane describes his friend Eve as an intimidating member of the Kijin tribe who is actually a good, fair-minded person. He reassures a curious Nina that the note is just a simple request for Eve to help a girl named Chris. With a parting warning, Kane urges her not to push herself too hard since his team is based at headquarters and cannot assist her in the Western District. Nina clutches the precious slip of paper, marveling at how incredibly expensive such a basic item is in this world. A radiant smile of pure gratitude breaks across Nina's face as she thanks her new mentors for their kindness. Looking satisfied, the two veteran adventurers smile back at the determined young girl as she prepares to depart. Nina waves a final goodbye and turns to march out of the Grand Guild Hall into the city streets. As she walks, Nina reflects on how unexpectedly kind and helpful Anna-san and Kane-san were during her visit. Checking the position of the sun, she realizes it is already noon and decides she must prioritize finding a place to stay. The young traveler stops in a busy square to orient herself within the massive city. Deciding to explore a bit more, Nina takes a detour toward the northern district to see a different side of Garel. She turns into a narrow alleyway where towering stone buildings loom over a cluttered cobblestone path. Staring around in shock, she notes that the entire district looks patched up, chaotic, and incredibly crowded. Despite the mess, Nina finds the lively, cluttered atmosphere of the northern sector surprisingly fun to explore. Her attention is suddenly caught by the overhead structures spanning the narrow gaps between buildings. A crumbling stone archway hangs precariously over the street, showing clear signs of decay and neglect. Nina feels a surge of anxiety as she realizes the bridge looks like it could collapse onto the street at any moment. She finds herself staring intently at the structural weaknesses, unable to ignore buildings that seem ready to fall apart from a single impact. The young girl realizes her hyper-awareness of these architectural flaws is a direct result of her unique house-building skill. Snapping out of her trance, she panics upon realizing how much time she has wasted and starts searching for an inn. She recalls the farmers at the morning market mentioning a specific family-run inn located near the outer wall. Leading Peru-chan toward the wall, Nina heads for the recommended inn, hoping its cheap prices and friendly atmosphere are as good as they said. Spotting her destination, the young adventurer cheerfully announces her arrival. A wooden sign adorned with a carved bird and floral motif proudly reads, "Spirits Perch Inn." A friendly woman steps out to greet her, asking the little miss if she has business at the inn. Beaming with excitement, Nina happily declares her intention to book a long-term stay. The woman lets out a hearty laugh, delighted to welcome an eager new customer to her establishment. Her expression softening with maternal concern, the innkeeper marvels that someone so young has been traveling all alone. She warmly instructs Nina to tie her horse in any open spot, promising that her son Loki will take excellent care of the animal. The kind innkeeper gently guides the tiny adventurer inside the cozy building. Nina is shown to a simple but remarkably clean wooden room featuring a comfortable bed and a sturdy desk. She politely thanks her host, who flashes a warm peace sign and tells her to call if she needs anything at all. Left alone in the quiet room, the exhausted young girl sits heavily on the edge of the mattress and lets out a deep sigh. Throwing her arms wide, she falls back onto the soft bed with a joyful smile, thrilled to finally rest in peace. Staring thoughtfully at the ceiling, she reflects on the incredibly long journey she took to escape her remote hometown. A solemn flashback reveals her as a small child, noting that her entire life completely changed after undergoing the birthright at age 10. The narrative explains that priests normally perform this sacred rite at birth to reveal a newborn's world-bestowed name and skills. Typically, babies receive 1 or 2 skills that drastically accelerate their learning, and by adulthood, most people possess 3 distinct abilities. However, because priests never visited her remote frontier village, Nina spent her first 10 years completely nameless and ignorant of her true skills. A harsh memory shows her abusive father violently hurling a sack at her while screaming that she is completely useless. Cowering in fear, the small, nameless child tearfully apologizes to her enraged parent. Looming menacingly over her, the cruel man threatens to sell her off if her eventually revealed skills prove to be worthless. While most people receive useful abilities, basic household chores like cleaning are heavily stigmatized as useless, dud skills. Furthermore, society coldly brands anyone who reaches adulthood with only 1 or 2 skills as an absolute failure. The bleak history of her hometown reveals it was a miserable settlement formed by social outcasts scraping by near a penal colony. Tragedy struck early when her mother failed to recover from childbirth and passed away while Nina was still very young. Blaming her for the loss, her already distant father grew dangerously cold and physically abusive toward the innocent girl. The young girl's blank, traumatized eyes reflect years of quiet, inescapable suffering. The only brief respite from her daily torment came when she secretly helped care for an elderly witch who lived nearby. Her miserable life reached a turning point when a traveling priest finally happened to visit their forgotten village. Sitting nervously on a wooden stool, the 10-year-old girl bravely endured the magical appraisal process while her father watched closely. The priest's magical staff glowed, formally revealing her true name as Krisnina and her sole skill as Housebuilding. Her father's eye widened in sheer, terrifying disbelief as he processed the highly unusual classification. Exploding into a violent rage, he screamed that her single, vague skill was a worthless dud, infuriated that she didn't even get a basic cooking ability. Kneeling beside the trembling girl, the concerned priest gently asked if she was all right. In that chaotic, terrifying moment, a sudden spark of absolute clarity violently awakened within the young girl's mind. Though she had felt faint traces of it before, she finally realized the absolute truth of her existence. She recognized that she was a reincarnated soul, and her new name perfectly matched her past life's identity as Kurisu Nina. Her father's previous, cruel threat to sell her echoed terrifyingly in her awakened mind. With her adult memories fully restored, she evaluated her grim reality with absolute, chilling clarity. She rapidly deduced that staying in the village would guarantee her father carrying out his threat to sell her into slavery. Refusing to be a victim, she desperately begged the visiting priests for salvation, and they mercifully smuggled her out of the settlement. Leaving her abusive past behind, she immediately embarked on a grueling, multi-year journey to find a place where she truly belonged. Hiding near a massive, terrifying boar, she learned that this fantasy world, where survival completely depends on skills, is far harsher than her previous modern life. Sitting on her in bed, she firmly believes she only survived because of her past life's knowledge, vowing to make something of her single, house-building skill. Reaching into her worn leather pouch with a confident smirk, she pulls out a highly valuable slip of magical paper. Smiling wickedly, she reminds herself that she possesses a secret, powerful magical technique taught to her by the village witch. Sitting at her wooden desk with a quill in hand, the young adventurer beams with a bright, determined idea. She confidently declares that crafting and selling magical paper is a surefire way to earn money. Although creating magical paper normally requires a specialized skill, she notes that anyone can do it by meticulously memorizing the intricate patterns. She acknowledges that without the innate skill, drawing the complex designs accurately requires an incredible amount of time and grueling effort. Recalling her past, she remembers the agonizing days of failing over and over while learning the craft from the village witch. Staring intensely at her blank parchment, she firmly resolves that sheer effort can eventually master any skill. Humming a cheerful tune, she happily embraces the tedious task, noting that her love for detailed work makes it the perfect way to kill time in a world lacking entertainment. A sprawling array of intricate, perfectly drawn runes completely covers 10 fresh sheets of paper. Admiring her handiwork, she decides her current stock is enough to sell and plans to craft a few extra sheets for her own use. She carefully inspects her personal batch, proud of the smaller, easily hidden custom design created specifically for her by the wish. Closing her eyes with a peaceful smile, she vows to work hard, save her earnings, and leave the city to find a true forever home. Dreading the thought of sleeping on the rough ground during her long journey, she considers purchasing a carriage equipped with a proper bed and desk. A sudden spark of profound realization flashes across her wide eyes. Leaning forward in pure excitement, she excitedly realizes that a well-equipped wagon is basically a mobile house. Her mind races with thrilling possibilities as she deduces that dubbing the carriage a house might finally trigger her unique skill. A vivid flashback transports her back to her hometown, where she stares blankly at a dilapidated lumber storage she was tasked to repair. Sweating with overwhelming anxiety, her younger self panicked over having absolutely no experience in fixing wooden structures. She tapped her cheek thoughtfully, desperately trying to find a solution to the impossible task. A tiny, scurrying mouse suddenly caught her sharp attention. Connecting the dots, she wondered if the little creature actually lived inside the broken shed. Staring intently at the structure, she boldly reasoned that the lumber storage was technically a home for the mice. The word house echoed powerfully in her mind, unlocking a profound conceptual shift. The very second she classified the shed as a house, a massive flood of architectural knowledge instantly materialized in her brain. Gripping a hammer with absolute precision, her body instinctively moved on its own to execute the flawless repairs. A pristine, perfectly reconstructed storage shed stands as a testament to her sudden, mysterious craftsmanship. Returning to the present, she cheerfully confirms that her house-building skill activates flawlessly as long as she genuinely perceives the target object as a home. Calculating her limited funds, she brilliantly plans to bypass the heavy costs of building a carriage from scratch by simply purchasing and modifying a cheap, used wagon. A massive grin of pure delight stretches across her flushed face as she marvels at her own genius loophole. Throwing her fists triumphantly into the air, she loudly declares that it is finally time to start raking in the cash. Staring up at the grand, imposing architecture of the Magic Guild, she confidently assumes the wealthy city will pay top dollar for her handcrafted wares. Marching directly up to the counter, she proudly thrusts her stack of magical paper toward a deeply skeptical clerk. Her bold confidence hits a sudden wall when the clerk suspiciously asks if she possesses the required magical skills, forcing her to bluntly admit that she does not. A middle-aged clerk with a skeptical gaze looks down at the young girl across the counter. Shocked by the low valuation, the man reluctantly offers to buy the sheets for a mere 3 silver coins. Nina maintains her composure and urges the dismissive man to actually inspect the product before finalizing his decision. Scoffing at the request, the clerk refuses the deal and claims that items made without an official skill possess no value. Frustrated by the city's arrogance, Nina argues that every other town accepted her work before storming out of the shop. Seeking a fairer deal, the the young adventurer returns to the grand entrance of the Adventurers Guild headquarters. Charging through the hall, Nina desperately calls out to Anna about her struggle to sell her handcrafted magical paper. The girl gripes about the merchant's lowball offer while Anna suggests that the Magic Guild might offer a significantly higher price. Anna's eyes widen in sheer amazement as she notices the exceptionally intricate and beautifully drawn magical patterns on the paper. Recognizing a unique business opportunity, the guild staff member immediately decides to enter formal negotiations. The group retreats to a private room where Nina prepares to present her work to a professional appraiser. A friendly man named Watts introduces himself and explains that he will be evaluating the quality of her magical items. Watts leans in with intense curiosity, scrutinizing the glowing runes through his professional lens. Stunned by the high-caliber craftsmanship, the appraiser praises the inclusion of advanced magical patterns within the batch. Anna and Watts share a nod of total approval, concluding that the quality of the paper is beyond reproach. With the appraisal complete, the discussion shifts toward the specific pricing tiers for each grade of paper. Watts lists the rates for beginners, intermediates, and advanced magic, with the highest grade reaching 15 gold coins per sheet. Nina gapes in stunned silence as she realizes her work is worth many times more than the merchant's insulting offer. To explain the massive price gap, Watts describes how the rival commercial guild takes a heavy cut from every sale. He explains that the commercial guild imposes much stricter conditions and higher taxes on those who aren't official members. Realizing the benefits of her current status, Nina calculates that her Adventurers Guild membership drastically reduces her tax burden. Watts commends her sharp intellect, confirming that she correctly understands the complex economic system of the city. He mentions with a smile that it is no surprise Anna has taken such a strong liking to the clever young girl. Shifting to the main point, Watts proposes that she make regular deliveries to the guild under a designated request contract. The lucrative deal requires a delivery every 7 days and offers a stable income plus a bonus fee for high-volume batches. Nina quickly realizes that this arrangement would finally provide the financial stability she needs to settle down. Overwhelmed by the incredible opportunity, the girl leaps from her seat and enthusiastically screams her acceptance. Nina quickly regains her professional poise, bowing deeply while formally accepting the generous terms of the contract. A close-up of her wide, determined eyes reflects her resolve to succeed and find a true home in this new world. Proving her wisdom, she requests an exemption clause to protect herself against unforeseen injuries or sudden illnesses. Watts is deeply impressed by her well-informed request and immediately agrees to add the fair protections to the agreement. The appraiser asks Nina to wait while he prepares the official contract paperwork to finalize their lucrative new partnership. A kind older woman approaches the wooden table, gently serving a large mug of ale to the waiting guests. Smiling warmly, Anna expresses her genuine relief and happiness that the young traveler decided to bring her business to them. Taking a cautious sip from her heavy wooden mug, Nina listens as Anna reveals their strained relationship with the Magic Guild over ridiculously high prices. Anna frowns with frustration, explaining that the Magic Guild takes unfair advantage of the fact that half the city's adventurers rely on magical papers. Nodding in understanding, Nina realizes this high demand is entirely driven by the city's massive underground labyrinth. The guild staffer emphasizes that carrying disposable magic is essential for conserving energy and ensuring a quick escape during dungeon emergencies. Processing the tactical needs of the labyrinth, the young crafter wonders aloud if she should focus her production on barrier spells. She further suggests that basic body enhancement and healing magic would likely be highly sought after even by beginner adventurers. Watts chimes in with a friendly smile, confirming that support magic sells incredibly well since most adventurers prioritize offensive skills. He advises her to deliver a mix of mainly support spells alongside some strong offensive magic to cover all combat necessities. The appraiser warns that while the deepest levels hold the deadliest threats, powerful monsters and sudden outbreaks occasionally terrorize the upper floors. Anna adds a grim note that adventurers cannot afford to hold back during emergencies, relying heavily on advanced magic to prevent monsters from invading the city streets. Sealing the lucrative deal, Watts generously offers to cover her taxes as a first-time bonus and instructs Anna to handle the payment. Nina sweats nervously at the incredible terms, stunned by a stroke of luck that feels almost too good to be true. Clapping her hands together, Anna cheerfully admits they were desperate for her help because the Magic Guild recently started restricting their paper supply. Watts leans in with a reassuring smile, expressing their desire for a long-term partnership without forcing her to stay against her will. Staring up with wide, shimmering eyes, the young girl listens as they warmly offer themselves as reliable mentors. Flashing a playful wink, Anna clarifies that their door is always open for life advice, not just business matters. A massive, heartwarming smile lights up Nina's face as she finally feels truly welcomed in the sprawling metropolis. She loudly expresses her deepest gratitude, overwhelmed by the sheer kindness of her new business partners. Her heart swells with quiet pride as she realizes the powerful guild officially recognizes and values her unique crafting skills. Anna nods with a gentle smile, formally trusting their new supplier while Nina enthusiastically accepts the heavy responsibility. Blinking as a sudden thought strikes her, the young adventurer pauses to ask her new friends for a massive favor. Anna looks slightly bewildered as she processes the tiny girl's ambitious request to purchase a used carriage. Quickly accommodating the request, Anna promises to write a formal letter of introduction to a trusted local merchant named Gowries. She explains that Gowries runs a bustling lumber workshop that frequently takes in old wooden goods, making it the perfect place to hunt for a carriage. Clutching the precious introduction letter to her chest, Nina beams with triumph as her dream of a mobile home takes a massive step forward. The joyful moment abruptly shatters when Anna casually asks if the young girl has formally checked in at the Western District branch yet. Looking down with a serious expression, Anna reminds her that bronze rank adventurers must complete at least one general request every 2 weeks. Nina breaks into a cold sweat as she realizes she completely forgot the mandatory rule, terrified by the threat of being exiled as a rogue adventurer. The scene shifts to the bustling interior of the Western District Adventurers Guild branch. Fumbling slightly at the counter, the small traveler urgently speaks with the local receptionist to secure her required assignment. Leaving the desk with a determined stride, she walks past a rugged, horned adventurer quietly enjoying his drink. The massive warrior abruptly stands up, the heavy wooden chair scraping loudly against the floorboards as he shifts his attention. Oblivious to the movement behind her, Nina stands before the sprawling request board, carefully scanning the chaotic mess of job postings. Weighing her limited options between guard duty and farm labor, she decides that gathering medicinal herbs in the forest is her safest bet. A deep, intimidating voice suddenly rumbles from behind, bluntly asking if she is the tiny runt named Chris. A towering, muscular figure looms dangerously close, his massive frame completely eclipsing the small girl as she reviews the board. A close-up reveals the sharp, imposing features of the horned adventurer staring down with intense scrutiny. Nina glances nervously over her shoulder, her wide eyes locking onto the intimidating stranger who has abruptly interrupted her job hunt. Nina stands with her arms crossed and a look of absolute determination on her face. Glaring up at the towering figure before her, she flatly confirms that she is indeed the girl named Chris. The massive horned warrior peers down with a skeptical smirk, remarking on just how tiny she is. Nina freezes in stunned silence as the warrior's blunt assessment of her height echoes through the guild. The intimidating stranger maintains his intense gaze, his sharp eyes scrutinizing every detail of the small traveler. Refusing to back down, Nina narrows her eyes and stares right back at the imposing warrior. Rubbing her stiff muscles, Nina complains that her neck is starting to hurt from looking so far upward. Letting out a long, weary sigh, she tries to process the sudden arrival of this overwhelming stranger. Nina reaches into her gear and produces the official paper that has linked her to this situation. Releasing her frustration, the girl begins to stomp away while the panicked warrior desperately calls for her to wait. The warrior explains that Kane specifically asked him to help a little girl named Chris if anything went wrong. He looks on with a sweat-beaded brow, clearly out of his element as he tries to follow his friend's orders. Ignoring the brute, Nina approaches the counter and presents her herb-gathering request to a kind-looking clerk named Yuria. Nina points a finger at the hovering warrior and loudly demands that Yuria report him as a suspicious individual. While the warrior frantically tries to explain himself, Nina sticks her tongue out at him with childish defiance. Yuria looks at the man with a knowing smile, calmly identifying the towering intruder as Eve. Turning her attention to the brute, Yuria sternly scolds Eve for his arrogant attitude and for making people feel uncomfortable. Eve flinches under the clerk's maternal lecture, his intimidating aura completely vanishing in an instant. Hanging his head in shame, Eve offers a sincere apology to Nina and tries to use a friendlier tone. Feeling a bit guilty herself, Nina accepts the apology and admits that she was also being quite immature. Yuria wishes the girl luck with her work, prompting a cheerful and polite response from the young adventurer. Nina informs Eve that she has other business today and won't head into the forest until tomorrow morning. Eve asks if they can talk properly at that time, and Nina gives her reluctant consent with a quiet nod. Watching him leave, Nina reflects on the encounter and realizes she doesn't actually have any problems for him to solve. The scene shifts to a massive, bustling woodyard filled with the sound of sawing and the smell of fresh lumber. Nina announces her ambitious plan to buy a used carriage and use her skills to transform it into a mobile home. The workshop owner, Gowries, listens skeptically until Nina presents her formal letter of introduction from the guild. Nina confidently declares that the task will be simple because she possesses the rare house-building skill. While Gowries admits he has never heard of such a skill, Nina clarifies that she will be turning the wagon into a moving house. Considering her logic for a long moment, the craftsman finally gives her a respectful nod of understanding. Gowries invites her to follow him into the storage area to see what kind of stock he has available. Nina and Gowries stand before a row of worn, used carriages as she begins searching for the perfect foundation for her new home. Gowries gestures toward two affordable carriages, casually adding that he has a more expensive option available if she is willing to pay extra. Nina's eyes sparkle with instant excitement as she spots the perfect carriage and happily shouts her approval. Gowries explains that the sturdy long-distance cargo wagon was abandoned because its heavy, bulky frame was completely unsuited for city use. Thrilled by the incredible discovery, the young adventurer eagerly asks the workshop owner if she is truly allowed to buy the massive wagon. Gowries scratches his chin in hesitation and bluntly asks the tiny girl how she actually plans to move such a heavy vehicle. Anticipating the logistical problem, Nina confidently offers to pay for temporary workspace so she can modify the carriage right there in the yard. Amused by her determination, Gowries generously waives the space fee and offers his tools in exchange for letting his apprentices watch her work. The burly craftsman leans in with genuine curiosity, admitting that he desperately wants to witness the incredibly rare house-building skill with his own eyes. An exterior view of the bustling workshop frames Nina's internal realization that her funds are nearly depleted after purchasing the carriage on an installment plan. The following morning, the young adventurer proudly leads her towering draft horse through the massive stone gates of the city. Standing patiently by the dirt road, the armored warrior Eve greets the young girl and notes that she actually kept her promise to meet him. Nina stares blankly at the imposing horned warrior, dryly reminding him that she obviously showed up because they made a promise. Eve casually clarifies that Kane specifically asked him to keep an eye on her, prompting Nina to ask what exactly they need to discuss. The warrior's expression turns deadly serious as he describes a recent string of kidnappings involving small children. Looking up with genuine concern, the young traveler listens intently as Eve reveals that one kidnapped child from 6 months ago is still missing. As they stroll away from the towering city gates, Nina curiously questions why a high-ranking adventurer is handling security instead of the official guards. Eve explains that high-rank adventurers have a solemn duty to help with security and train junior members whenever the city lacks manpower. A brief flashback reveals the sheer awe of the guild staff when Eve casually presented his elite gold rank identification card. The local staff practically vibrated with excitement as they recognized Eve as the famous Kijin Swordmaster, stunned to meet someone with an advanced skill. Snapping back to the present, Eve sheepishly waves off his legendary reputation while the young girl stares up at him in quiet disbelief. A sudden spark of realization flashes across the young girl's wide eyes as they continue their walk. Stopping near a cluster of large rocks, she abruptly asks the legendary gold-rank adventurer to wait a second. Using a sturdy boulder as a makeshift step, the tiny traveler awkwardly positions herself to mount her massive steed. With a strained, desperate grunt, the small girl valiantly attempts to hoist her body up into the tall saddle. Finally settling into her seat with a breathless sigh, she cheerfully apologizes to the warrior for the brief delay. Flushing bright red with pure embarrassment, Nina angrily defends her clumsy mounting process by reminding the tall warrior that she physically cannot jump that high. She furiously grumbles about owning a leather ladder but refusing to use it because cruel onlookers mock her for looking like a clinging cicada. Outraged by the warrior's poorly stifled laughter, the tiny adventurer spurs her horse forward and loudly threatens to leave him in the dust. A heavy leather boot slams into the dirt with explosive force as the Kijin warrior effortlessly launches himself forward. Easily keeping pace beside her trotting horse, Eve casually apologizes for laughing at her adorable physical struggles. Glaring down with a fierce pout, the young girl begrudgingly admits that the Kijin tribe's raw physical abilities are incredibly unfair. Shifting the conversation back to serious business, Nina shrewdly asks if the famous warrior's sudden free time implies he just finished a massive job. Eve explains that until recently, his group was fiercely competing to reach the absolute lowest level of the underground labyrinth. He reveals that strict rules enforce a monthly rotation for clans challenging the depths, meaning his party cannot return to the bottom for another 2 months. Holding the reins of her horse, Nina skeptically remarks that the rotation sounds like collusion and wonders if the rival clans actually keep their promises. The towering warrior blinks in sheer confusion, completely unfamiliar with the term collusion. Nina quickly clarifies that the system acts as a mutual agreement to prevent any single group from unfairly sneaking ahead in the dungeon exploration. Nodding in slow realization, Eve readily accepts her logical explanation of the complex dungeon politics. The sprawling, dense canopy of the frontier forest looms quietly ahead as they continue their trek. Suddenly, a pack of massive, terrifying rat monsters bursts from the underbrush with exposed fangs. Without missing a beat, Eve unleashes a devastating kick that instantly crushes one of the monstrous rodents. The sheer force of the warrior's blow sends another beast flying helplessly through the air. Completely unbothered by the violent skirmish, Nina calmly kneels in the dirt to snap a fresh medicinal herb from the ground. Clasping her hands together in pure joy, the young adventurer marvels at the absolute safety provided by her elite bodyguard. Eve sternly warns her that traveling this deep into the mountains is incredibly dangerous, though Nina cheerfully insists that Peruchan's presence guarantees her safety. The warrior raises an eyebrow in doubt, bluntly pointing out that her companion is ultimately just an ordinary horse. Sweating nervously under the intense, glaring eyes of the massive beast, Eve realizes he has gravely insulted the proud animal. Gently stroking her loyal mount, Nina proudly reveals that Peruchan actually possesses the mighty blood of a dragon horse. Shrugging off the animal's pedigree, Eve confidently reminds her that he can effortlessly crush local monsters with his bare hands anyway. Gripping the scruff of a defeated monster, Nina boldly claims that while she lacks agility, her raw grip strength and back muscles are highly dependable. Her wide eyes lock with intense focus as she demonstrates her surprisingly powerful hold on the terrifying creature. With a satisfied smile, the tiny girl effortlessly dangles the limp, defeated monster from her small hand. Staring at the bizarre display of strength, the legendary warrior awkwardly admits that she is surprisingly tough. Grabbing Eve's massive arm, she cheerfully boasts about her solid core and natural talent for carrying heavy loads. Processing her unusual physical density, Eve genuinely wonders aloud if her strength stems from having dwarven blood. The young girl immediately explodes into an angry shout when the warrior casually suggests her height is due to a dwarven lineage. Calming down slightly, Nina admits she isn't entirely sure of her ancestry while Eve notes that she looks perfectly human. She thoughtfully explains that her father was a normal human and her petite mother lacked the typical bulky traits of a full dwarf. A soft, understanding smile crosses the towering warrior's face as he listens to her family history. Reaching out with a massive, gentle hand, Eve warmly pats the small girl's head and agrees that her mixed heritage makes perfect sense. Flashing a bright grin, Eve reveals his own shared struggle by admitting he is actually a half-human who claims the Kijin tribe purely to avoid tedious explanations. Staring blankly ahead with half-lidded eyes, the young adventurer processes the sudden wave of familial affection. She inwardly grumbles, highly suspicious that this terrifying gold-rank warrior is rapidly slipping into the role of a doting older cousin. The peaceful rustling of the forest leaves continues to echo around the newly formed, unlikely duo. Beaming with joy, Nina celebrates their successful harvest by exclaiming that they have gathered a massive amount of herbs. Eve presents a heavy sack of monster tails as proof of extermination, generously offering his big haul to the surprised young adventurer. The veteran warrior's expression hardens into a mask of intense focus as he suddenly senses something unusual in the surrounding woods. Peruchan remains perfectly still, his sharp eyes scanning the thick foliage for any sign of movement. Noticing the change in atmosphere, a cautious Nina asks if there is a dangerous monster lurking nearby. Observing her loyal companion's calm demeanor, Nina concludes that whatever is approaching cannot be a serious threat. Eve spots a mysterious creature being hounded by small monsters and wonders aloud if it is attempting to flee from its pursuers. A soft, mystical shimmering sound echoes through the quiet forest clearing. Sparkles of light dance in the air as Nina's eyes widen with the thrilling realization that they might have found a real fairy. Taken aback by her sudden change in tone, Eve asks the young girl why she has become so incredibly excited all of a sudden. Pumping her fists with unbridled enthusiasm, Nina declares that they must immediately jump in to help the creature. Although Eve warns that they haven't even identified the target yet, a determined Nina brushes off his concerns and charges forward. Her voice filled with pure wonder, she admits that meeting a legendary fairy has always been one of her greatest dreams. Recalling the village witch's teachings, Nina realizes that spirits often reward helpers with high-quality goods and wonders if her house-building skill could be of use. The group pauses at the edge of the brush, peering through the leaves to locate the source of the mysterious energy. Nina's eyes light up with triumph as she points toward the trees and loudly announces that she has finally spotted the creature. High above in the canopy, several dark-feathered birds watch the newcomers with wary, glowing eyes. To her utter bewilderment, Nina finds herself staring at a tiny, round bird chirping innocently on a branch. The young adventurer poses brightly with a tiny, round bird resting comfortably on top of her braided hair. Observing the tiny creature from afar, the towering warrior questions if this harmless-looking bird was truly the one being chased by the monsters. Deciding to hang back, Eve instructs the young girl to step forward and gently help the stranded creature. Reaching out with an encouraging smile, Nina playfully chirps and beckons the little bird to come closer. The round, fluffy bird remains perched safely within the dense foliage, staring down blankly at the strange humans. Drooping her shoulders in disappointment, the girl sighs and admits that wild birds probably do not warm up to humans so easily. Suddenly, the tiny creature twitches its head, its dark, beady eyes locking intently onto the young adventurer. Flapping its small wings, the fluffy bird leaps from the high branch and flutters gracefully toward the ground. Nina gasps in pleasant surprise as the little creature lands gently on a low branch right in front of her face. Leaning in with sparkling eyes, she marvels at its adorable, fluffy appearance while the bird lets out a soft chirp. A massive, heartwarming smile stretches across the young girl's face as she stares affectionately at her new tiny friend. Narrowing her eyes suspiciously, Nina bluntly asks if the creature can understand her words and wonders if it is actually a fairy in disguise. The round bird awkwardly averts its gaze and chirps innocently, clearly trying to play dumb. Crossing her arms, the young adventurer firmly tells the creature that there is absolutely no use pretending to be a normal bird anymore. Caught in its obvious lie, the mysterious little bird gives a sharp, resigned chirp of agreement. Patting her massive draft horse, Nina reassuringly explains that her loyal companion is a strict herbivore and poses absolutely no threat to the tiny fairy. Turning back to her towering bodyguard, the young girl eagerly asks if she can take the little creature under her wing. Scanning the surrounding forest, Eve concludes that the creature is definitely a stray fairy since there are no powerful spirits nearby. Nina worries about the warrior calling the fairy dopey, but Eve casually dismisses the concern by noting that fairies are naturally easygoing. The narrative clarifies that while spirits are divine servants who rarely manifest, fairies are their cherished, much more common kin. Staring intently at the unprotected fairy, Nina gently extends an invitation for the creature to join her on her journey. The fluffy bird instantly perks up, letting out a joyful chirp as it excitedly accepts her generous offer. Blinking in sheer astonishment, Nina catches the eager fairy as it immediately launches itself right into her waiting hands. Cradling the tiny bird, she admits that its trusting nature is deeply concerning and firmly vows to protect it. Pressing the incredibly soft creature against her cheek, the young adventurer happily celebrates making her very first fairy friend. A serene view of the bright, cloud-swept sky reflects the peaceful conclusion to the sudden forest skirmish. Suddenly remembering an important detail, the young girl snaps back to attention. Holding the perched bird on her leather glove, she curiously asks if the little fairy already possesses a name. Since the bird can only chirp, Nina devises a clever plan to read a list of sounds until the fairy responds to one it likes. Pausing briefly to wonder if fairies even have genders, the young girl eventually decides on the name Isa for her new companion. The fairy violently pecks at her fingers in protest, forcing a panicked Nina to frantically apologize and rethink her naming strategy. After deducing that the fairy is about a year old, Nina begins to ask if it previously traveled alongside a powerful spirit. A flashback reveals the tiny, fluffy fairy blissfully floating through the air on a calm day. The peaceful scene violently shifts as a sudden, powerful gust of wind catches the small creature and aggressively sweeps him off his path. Listening to the story, Nina affectionately calls him a klutz while imagining the poor fairy desperately fleeing from a terrifying monster attack. As the bird enthusiastically chirps its agreement, Nina gently asks if a powerful spirit will eventually come to retrieve him. The fairy lets out a soft, sad sound, prompting Nina to sympathetically note that returning to his master is probably for the best. Smiling warmly, the young adventurer admits she always dreamed of conversing with a fairy and wishes they could travel together forever. The fairy gives a spirited chirp as Nina cheerfully suggests they look after one another until his guardian finally arrives. The narrative jumps forward a few days, explaining how Nina vigorously took on jobs to fund her ambitious mobile home project. Standing alongside Eve in the forest, she spends her mornings gathering medicinal herbs while ensuring her loyal draft horse gets plenty of exercise and food. By the soft glow of candlelight, the determined crafter meticulously inscribes complex runes onto stacks of magical paper late into the night. With her funds finally secured, a triumphant Nina formally declares the start of her massive carriage renovation project. The imposing, bare-bones structure of the heavy cargo wagon sits waiting inside the bustling, dust-filled lumber yard. Staring intently at a massive wooden wheel, the young builder carefully evaluates the foundational mechanics of her new mobile home. Gripping her chin in deep thought, she humbly admits that her lack of experience with complex undercarriages leaves her with much to learn. Two burly craftsmen praise her incredibly fast learning pace, though Nina gratefully credits the workshop staff for gathering materials and offering invaluable advice. She reveals her meticulous process of repairing, dismantling, and studying the wagon parts, firmly believing that magical skills are entirely useless without a solid foundation of real knowledge. Leaning heavily over a sprawling blueprint, Nina hums in intense concentration while the two craftsmen watch her work. Analyzing the architectural plans, she decides she must prioritize keeping the living quarters extremely lightweight while still heavily reinforcing the outer walls. Acknowledging the constant threat of monsters, she stresses the absolute necessity of balancing structural integrity with mobility since defensive magic papers cannot be maintained indefinitely. When a senior carpenter asks about her supplies, the young builder frowns and notes a critical shortage of lumber for the wagon's upper framing. The generous craftsman immediately offers to supply the missing wood at a heavy discount, prompting a bright, grateful smile from the tiny adventurer. Observing the collaborative environment, the narrative highlights how the local artisans constantly pool their specialized construction skills to educate and support one another. A soft, deeply appreciative smile graces Nina's face as she marvels at the incredible warmth and camaraderie of the lumber yard. Staring down at a neatly organized pile of freshly cut, heavy wooden components, she calculates that they finally have everything needed to begin assembly. Rolling up her sleeves with renewed vigor, the energetic builder boldly declares her intent to tackle the complex undercarriage right away. Before diving in, she formally requests the craftsmen to watch her back, warning them that her intense focus completely blinds her to her surroundings once her skill activates. The narrative elaborates that unleashing her house-building ability heavily drains her internal mana, though leveling up will eventually extend her working endurance. Reflecting on her rigorous past training, she resolves to carefully throttle her magical output instead of recklessly burning through her newly expanded mana reserves. A tight close-up of her determined eye captures the exact, thrilling second she begins to channel her powerful energy. Whispering her invocation with absolute conviction, the young crafter conceptually redefines the massive wagon into a true, living home. A surge of flawless, architectural intuition instantly floods her mind, allowing her to perfectly identify the exact tools and methods required for the complex job. Guided by her supernatural craftsmanship, she effortlessly maneuvers a massive wooden plank into position to begin constructing her dream home. Guided by her activated skill, the young builder instantly understands the exact measurements needed to shave down the planks and perfectly reinforce the carriage's wooden base. Watching her work in pure astonishment, the two veteran craftsmen gape at the sheer, blinding speed of her flawless movements. Gripping her heavy hammer with glowing hands, Nina marvels at how the mysterious power feels like having a second version of herself assisting with tasks that normally require an extra pair of hands. The magical enhancement grants her the immense physical strength needed to single-handedly hold heavy wheel components in place, making the complex assembly process incredibly easy. Letting out a soft breath of relief, the tiny adventurer proudly confirms that she can successfully reinforce the massive undercarriage entirely on her own. Standing before the fully assembled, glowing wooden wheel, she realizes the absolute, game-changing true potential of her unique house-building skill. Snapping out of her focused trance, a lightly sweating Nina nervously looks back at the silent craftsman and asks if her rapid handiwork is acceptable. Quickly stepping forward to inspect the massive wooden wheel, one of the amazed workers confirms that her instant construction possesses absolutely no structural flaws. The craftsmen passionately praise her impressive handling of the complex section, admitting they were too distracted by her blinding speed to even track her precise movements. The senior carpenter arrives and notes the completed wheel section, prompting the stunned workers to excitedly debate if her unique ability heavily outclasses standard carpentry skills. They loudly marvel at her impossible feat of attaching massive, 3-meter planks entirely unassisted, a task that even a skilled carpenter could never pull off alone. Crowding eagerly around the bewildered little girl, the curious workers bombard her with technical questions about her focus and the maximum duration of her skill. The workshop boss firmly steps in to rescue her, ordering his inquisitive men to stop pestering the hardworking girl and focus on their own jobs. Smiling warmly at the friendly crew, Nina expresses her genuine happiness at choosing this supportive workshop, having learned incredibly valuable lessons while having fun. Clenching her small fists with renewed determination, she vows to earn even more money to gather the remaining materials required for the carriage's upper structure. The towering Kijin warrior suddenly arrives, rubbing his neck and casually inviting the starving young crafter out for a meal after completing their guild deliveries. Hearing the generous offer, Nina eagerly accepts the invitation the second the massive warrior confirms he will be paying for the food. Humming a cheerful tune while walking beside her towering bodyguard, the young girl excitedly wonders what kind of massive, delicious feast awaits them. Eve explains that the restaurant is managed by a branch of the Neon Group, guaranteeing the food will taste incredible even if the exotic dishes are completely unfamiliar to her. The young adventurer freezes mid-step, her eyes widening in absolute shock as a highly specific, utterly impossible word registers in her mind. A close-up of her travel-worn clothes highlights the heavy, lingering tension as her brain scrambles to process the phrase, Neon Group. Oblivious to her internal crisis, Eve casually mentions that the group is also known as the Neon Tribe, while the little bird happily chirps above them. Staring down at the cobblestone path with a serious, shadowed expression, Nina quietly mutters that she has only heard vague rumors about them. The narrative dramatically concludes by emphasizing the staggering revelation of the Neon Tribe, teasing a massive, undeniable connection to her past life in Japan. The narrative explains that people reincarnated with memories of their past lives are called the Neon Tribe in this world, largely because most of them originate from Japan. Nina vividly recalls her previous life, standing near a train station right before the last train arrived, when a mysterious, deadly line suddenly passed straight through her body. She quietly wonders if that strange line also struck others nearby, theorizing that they might have died alongside her and reincarnated into this same fantasy world. Although initially welcomed for introducing innovative ideas, the Neon Tribe soon faced heavy public backlash because some members exhibited extreme behavior, leading locals to view them as weird and unpredictable. This brewing cultural stigma is exactly why the young adventurer strictly guards her secret, refusing to tell anyone that she is a reincarnated person retaining memories from her past. She firmly believes there is absolutely no benefit in revealing her true origins, desperately wanting to avoid getting dragged into any strange or dangerous political situations. A close-up shows a large, steaming bowl of freshly cooked food being carefully set down onto a sturdy wooden table. The friendly restaurant staff serves the eager diners, and Eve enthusiastically urges Nina to try the food, guessing she might actually recognize it if she looks closely. Nina stares in pure, breathless disbelief as she recognizes a massive spread of classic Japanese dishes, including nikujiga, stir-fried vegetables, and a hearty katsudon. Her wide, trembling eyes betray her overwhelming shock as she tries to process the deeply nostalgic, utterly impossible feast sitting right before her. Eve casually mentions that the Neon Group is directly responsible for spreading rice across the world, making it a common staple found in almost every town. Nina mentally rejects his bold claim, vividly remembering that rice was absolutely impossible to find in the remote frontier areas she previously traveled. She recalls the grueling days when she couldn't even secure wheat, surviving solely by grinding up dried plants, mixing them with water, and baking the miserable paste. Gently picking up a thick, perfectly cooked slice of meat with wooden chopsticks, the young girl prepares to take her first, highly anticipated bite. Chewing slowly, she processes the explosive, familiar flavor and softly whispers that the meal is absolutely delicious. Overcome with sheer emotion, thick tears stream down Nina's flushed cheeks as she loudly wails about how incredibly good the food tastes. Eve and the restaurant worker freeze in absolute panic, completely bewildered by the small girl's sudden, dramatic outburst of tears. Blubbering through her tears, Nina desperately tries to explain that she has never tasted a meal so rich, tender, and juicy in this entire world. The panicked staff scrambles to comfort the weeping child, kindly offering her a complimentary serving of sweet anchoromochi to help calm her down. The smiling worker reassures a confused Eve that the extra dessert is completely on the house, smoothly waving off the warrior's concern that they didn't even order it. Handing over the sweet treat, the kind worker explains his boss's strict policy to always properly thank any customer who cries from how delicious their cooking is. Sniffling quietly, a deeply grateful Nina accepts the sweet dessert and politely thanks the generous staff member. A blissful, heartwarming smile returns to the young girl's face as she happily munches on the sweet mochi, much to Eve's silent relief. The mood quickly shifts when Eve indignantly asks about his share, shocked that the tiny girl is genuinely planning to eat the entire massive feast by herself after he offered to treat her. Bidding them farewell, the friendly staff member warmly invites them back, promising to throw in another little extra treat next time. Walking back through the quiet streets, Nina apologizes for her sudden crying fit while Eve gently offers to escort her all the way back to her inn. Smiling brightly with her fairy companion perched on her hand, Nina affectionately teases the little bird for eating absolutely everything in sight. A solemn, thoughtful expression crosses Eve's sharp features as he silently watches the cheerful young adventurer walk beside him. Shifting to a more serious tone, Eve casually mentions that members of the Neon Group will soon arrive in the city for the upcoming Pyrini campaign. Looking down at her intently, the warrior explains that he brought her to their restaurant specifically to help her warm up to the widely feared group. Nina frowns and repeats the dark rumors she's heard about the tribe arbitrarily joining wars for their own amusement, which Eve admits isn't entirely false. However, the veteran adventurer defends them by explaining that their unimaginable use of powerful skills often breeds intense jealousy, leading ordinary people to unfairly badmouth the mysterious group. Smiling reassuringly, the towering warrior reminds her of the incredible meal they just shared as proof that most reincarnated people actually create amazing things. The young girl stares up with wide, shimmering eyes, absorbing his surprisingly supportive perspective. Eve playfully teases her about crying over the delicious food, causing a heavily blushing Nina to frantically demand he forget about her embarrassing outburst. Arriving back at the familiar wooden sign of the Spirit's Perch Inn, they are cheerfully greeted by the innkeeper and her son Loki. Nina happily announces her return while the kind innkeeper warmly welcomes the young adventurer back to her temporary home. Before departing, the protective gold-rank warrior politely asks the innkeeper to keep a close eye on the small traveler. Offering a gentle, reassuring smile, Eve tells her to get some proper rest before bidding her farewell for the night. The maternal innkeeper notes that the warrior is a genuinely good man, playfully teasing that it's a shame he is a bit too old for the young girl. Bursting into laughter, Nina completely agrees and dismisses the idea, noting that a grown man making a move on a little girl would be seriously messed up. Settling down, she reflects on the day's events and feels a profound sense of relief that Eve didn't harbor any prejudice against the reincarnated Neon tribe. Crossing her arms with a deadpan expression, she cynically wonders if the muscle-brained warrior simply hasn't thought deeply enough to actually form a prejudice. The following morning, the young adventurer returns to the bustling Western District Guild branch and heads for the heavy wooden doors. Peering around the crowded hall, she realizes her towering bodyguard is nowhere to be found and wonders if he took on a new request. Staring blankly at the massive notice board, she is completely bewildered to find that every single herb-gathering request has mysteriously vanished. Her confusion is abruptly interrupted when a smug, low-ranking adventurer proudly waves a thick stack of papers and declares he is taking every gathering job for the day. Narrowing her eyes with intense, absolute disdain, the tiny girl glares up at the selfish adventurer. Unfazed by her glare, the man sneers and bluntly accuses her of hogging all the easy requests lately. Grabbing his bronze identification tag, he aggressively states that he refuses to let a tiny shorty rank up faster than him. The jealous man violently points a finger at her, warning her not to get cocky just because she managed to secure a legendary Kijin Swordmaster as a bodyguard. Completely and utterly unbothered by his pathetic rant, Nina simply turns her back and walks away without saying a single word. While her fairy chirps angrily on her head, Nina casually accepts the guild's strict first-come rule and decides not to waste her energy on the rude man. Her peaceful retreat is interrupted when Yuria, the friendly guild receptionist, calls out from the wooden counter. Leaning over the desk with a warm smile, the helpful clerk offers the young traveler a brand new request. Reading the thick parchment, Nina blinks in surprise as she processes the strange request to polish the inside of a massive agate tortoise shell. Yuria explains that the complex job requires both delicate precision and surprising physical strength, perfectly matching Nina's unique capabilities. Realizing the wealthy client might sell her cheap materials for her mobile home project, a highly motivated Nina instantly accepts the heavy labor. Arriving at the cluttered monster material shop, the tiny adventurer finds the haggard owner and his staff completely exhausted. The weary shopkeeper sighs with heavy relief, incredibly grateful that the guild finally sent someone to assist them. Sweating nervously, the stressed owner explains that they were suddenly hit with a massive, emergency order that must be completed in just 7 days. A gloomy, oppressive aura hangs heavily over the workshop as the overworked staff sit in pure, silent despair. Noting their absolute exhaustion, Nina bravely volunteers to handle the physically demanding task of stripping the heavy shells, leaving the owner skeptical of her raw strength. To quickly prove her immense physical density, the deadpan young girl bluntly asks the owner for a solid piece of stone or hardwood to effortlessly smash. Gripping the thick piece of wood with her bare hands, the young girl violently snaps it in half to prove her raw strength. The shopkeeper and his exhausted staff stare in wide-eyed, absolute shock at the impossible display of physical power. A pair of heavy, calloused hands gently positions the massive agate tortoise shell onto the sturdy wooden workbench. Gripping her heavy tools with intense focus, Nina aggressively chips away at the tough interior of the giant shell. A close-up reveals her chisel violently stripping the stubborn material away with flawless, practiced precision. The bewildered shopkeeper gapes in pure astonishment, openly admitting that her speed and accuracy completely outclass his entire veteran team. Flanked by the awestruck workers, the tiny adventurer relentlessly hammers away at the massive shell without breaking a sweat. Large, jagged pieces of the tough shell violently break off under the sheer force of her relentless strikes. The frantic staff members eagerly crowd around her, begging their boss to raise her fee and pleading for her to return tomorrow. Sweating nervously under their intense pressure, Nina hesitates to decline since she urgently needs to visit the lumber mill. Desperate to retain her help, the staff generously promises to run her errands, submit her guild requests, and even buy her lunch. Yielding to their enthusiastic bribery, the team happily agrees to leave the heavy stripping to Nina while they handle the delicate interior polishing. The shopkeeper looks on with a sweat-beaded brow as the young girl effortlessly takes over the most grueling part of the labor. Holding her trusty hammer high, Nina maintains a fierce, unyielding look of absolute concentration. Lowering her tools at last, she lets out a heavy breath of relief as the intense work session finally concludes. A sparkling, towering stack of perfectly stripped shells proudly stands as undeniable proof that the brutal removal phase is finally complete. The exhausted men groan in absolute agony, whining that their entire bodies are incredibly sore and their arms refuse to lift. Realizing that everyone has completely reached their physical limits, a bright idea suddenly flashes across the young adventurer's mind. She cheerfully volunteers to craft some soothing cold compresses, revealing that a wise witch once taught her the secret recipe. Hauling a heavy wooden bucket of fresh water, she surprises the shopkeeper's wife by confirming that even non-healers can brew the remedy. She confidently explains that absolutely anyone can craft the simple version of the treatment without needing specialized magic. Beginning her practical demonstration, she details how to first soak a bunch of fresh mint leaves in freezing cold well water. The next critical step involves using that mint-infused water to smoothly and evenly spread out a layer of horse fat. Finally, she cheerfully concludes the lesson by explaining that applying the fragrant mixture to a clean cloth completes the process. She quickly warns that this specific remedy only treats muscle pain, while the stunned staff marvels at how surprisingly easy the recipe is. The rejuvenated workers sigh in absolute, fragrant bliss as the cooling compresses instantly soothe their desperately aching backs. The narrative reveals that Nina spent 3 grueling days stripping shells, ultimately ensuring the shop easily met its strict, impossible deadline. During their lively post-job party, the bewildered shopkeeper asks if she is genuinely searching for damaged wings from a rainbow hopper. She shyly admits she cannot afford the pristine, glass-like wings of the rare labyrinth monster, hoping to simply buy cheap, damaged scraps instead. Holding his hand up to abruptly stop her, the shopkeeper affectionately scolds the young girl for not mentioning her desire much sooner. Blinking in sheer confusion, she hesitates to accept his generous offer, worrying that the damaged materials still hold significant market value. The smiling couple gently urges her to take the goods without any hesitation, confessing they were planning to throw the damaged scraps away regardless. A massive, radiant smile stretches across the young crafter's face as she excitedly thanks them for the invaluable treasure. The entire shop staff beams with genuine warmth, deeply grateful for the tiny girl's incredible assistance during their frantic crisis. The peaceful scene transitions to the dark, quiet streets of the city as ominous clouds gather heavily above the towering stone buildings. Humming a cheerful tune, a heavily laden Nina happily carries her wooden box of precious materials through the deserted, shadowy alleyway. She excitedly imagines piecing the iridescent shards together to create stunning, stained glass windows for her future mobile home. A sudden, sharp sound abruptly shatters the silence, causing the young girl to freeze mid-step with wide eyes. Glancing nervously over her shoulder, she spots a dark, cloaked figure silently stalking her through the oppressive shadows of the empty street. Eve's previous grim warning about a recent string of child kidnappings and worsening city security violently echoes in her panicked mind. Trembling slightly in the cold, oppressive alleyway, a terrified Nina desperately prays that she hasn't just become the target of the notorious kidnapper.